If only I could go back in time and give little Megan some advice. She really needed it. Hello, if you're new here, my name is Megan and I have been an ESL teacher in China for the past 10 years. And that's still so crazy to say because when I became an ESL teacher, I never expected that it would become my career. But since it's been 10 years, I was thinking about how far I've come and what it was really like when I first started teaching. So today, I want to share 5 mistakes that I made as a first-time ESL teacher. Now, there are definitely more than 5. Don't get me wrong, there were probably 500. But today, I just want to talk about the 5 big mistakes that I really see when I look back on my first year of teaching. The first one, and maybe the biggest one, was that I never had enough material. To be honest, this came from me just not knowing how to plan lessons and not having the experience to think of new ideas. But I would sit down with my notebook on the weekends and I would take my topic and I would brainstorm ideas and I would write a lesson plan. And when I got to class, I was always left with like 10 minutes of awkward time at the end of class because the students had either gone through the material too quickly or I just hadn't planned enough material. So the first big mistake that I made was not having enough material. Of course, over time, I got better at thinking of new ideas, but even today, I always have a backup plan. If you were to open up one of my PowerPoints or one of my lesson plans, you would find there is one unused activity in every single one of my PowerPoints because I've learned from experience how awkward it is and how uncomfortable it is when you reach the end of your lesson and the bell hasn't run yet. And that's just because I didn't know how to plan lessons. And actually a big game changer for me was learning about the ESA lesson planning method, which stands for Engage, Study, Activate. If you're interested, I can make a video all about that. So if you'd like a video that really helps me with lesson planning, I can definitely make one for you. The second mistake that I made at the beginning of my teaching career was forcing my students to come to the front to present every single week. Now, this wasn't my idea. This is something that I got as teaching advice from other teachers who were around me, which let me just say that when you are a first-time teacher, getting teaching advice is like drinking water in a hot desert. It feels like a lifesaver. But I didn't understand that some advice works and some advice doesn't work for a variety of reasons. So this was one of the pieces of advice I had been given, was that you should have students make a conversation in every class, give them a little bit of time to work together, then after a few minutes, call 2 of those students to the front of the room to present their conversation and show everyone their conversation. To be honest, this is a great idea and it's something that I could still use a lot. However, my very first year of teaching, I didn't realize that there were other options and I didn't feel very confident in my power as a teacher. I didn't feel very confident being strong and assertive and telling the students that you must get up because my students at the beginning were very, very shy. And so it wasn't as simple as just asking John and Jill to come to the front of the room and present their ideas. When I said that, John and Jill just stayed frozen in their seats with terror in their eyes. They were really nervous to come to the front of the room and present. It was like pulling a deer towards the headlights. And I realized looking back, I wasted so much class time just pulling students to the front and encouraging them, saying, it's gonna be okay, it will be fine. And then they get to the front of the classroom and they're not confident, and the students aren't actually learning, and it's just a mess. If you want more information about how to get students to present in a better way, I can also make a video about that. The third mistake I made as a first-time ESL teacher might sound crazy, but it was having too much fun and focusing too much on having fun. Now, that might sound crazy because honestly, as ESL teachers, it's our job to make the class really fun and to make the lesson plan really interesting. Especially in China, our classes as foreign teachers are viewed a little bit more like labs. So most of our students will have local Chinese teachers who are also teaching them English. And in those classes, they really dig into things like grammar and vocabulary. But in my class, they're just supposed to practice. They're just supposed to make conversations, have fun using the language. And I leaned into that. On the plus side, my classes were so fun. I had a blast. They had a blast. But looking back, I realized I leaned into it too hard. When I was planning my lessons, my first question was, will students think this is interesting? Will students think this is fun? And I could still ask those questions, but I need to also connect it to, is this practical? Is this useful? Is this actually helping them on their English journey? Let me give you an example. One of my lessons, my first year of teaching, was about medicine. So in the textbook, they had a student go to the doctor and talk about his symptoms. I have a cough, I'm sneezing, things like that. And I thought, wow, this is so boring. Surely they have done lessons like this before. So my solution was to give the students crazy diseases, things that don't exist, like my hands are turning green, or suddenly I can talk to animals. Crazy fun illnesses, and they had to go to the doctor and explain their illness to the doctor. Was it fun? Absolutely. I was laughing, they were laughing. It was a blast. But my students didn't have the highest level of English in that class, and they could have truly benefited from having a chance to talk about normal symptoms, something that they might actually use in a daily situation. They didn't know the words for cough and sneeze and sore throat and prescription, but instead they were talking about green skin. So I would have just added an activity where they got to practice a more traditional structure, and then maybe we could have done something fun at the end. And this might sound weird coming after the point I just had, but the fourth mistake that I made for my first year of ESL teaching was that I was far too strict, and I had the wrong mindset about being strict as well. Again, this came from other people's opinions and the advice that they gave me. The idea that I got from other teachers was that these students aren't good at English, they don't enjoy English, they don't want to be there. So from the very first day, you need to lay down the law, and you need to be extra strict, and you need to go in there and be super strict and super serious. And in hearing that, it kind of affected my perspective in the way that I would walk into the class in a defensive mode. I walked into class expecting my students to be unhappy, expecting my students to not want to be there, which I think is also why I leaned so heavily into doing something for fun. I wanted them to enjoy my class. And to be honest, there will always be some students who don't want to study English, who don't want to be there. But for the most part, my students weren't like that. My students were happy to see me. They were excited to have a class with a foreign teacher where they got to practice. They enjoyed my style of lessons. And I wish I had walked into the classroom with a little bit more of an open mind and kind of looked at what the students were giving me rather than making some assumptions about them, especially when those assumptions led me to be a little bit more cold at the very beginning of the semester and of the school years. The fifth mistake that I made was a little bit similar to being too strict. It was not finding disciplinary measures that really matched my personality and matched my teaching style. I got so much advice and so much input from other people when I first became a teacher. And in doing so, I kind of was under the impression that there was a one-size-fits-all approach to teaching, and that if it worked for this teacher, it would work for this teacher, that there was a right and wrong way to do things. And that's simply not true. Every teacher has his or her own style, and they have different feelings in the classrooms and create different environments and have different focuses. And I didn't understand that. So I was using disciplinary measures that really didn't match my style. For example, one of the pieces of advice I was given was that students don't want to be in class, so they're going to be on their phones all the time. If you see someone on their phone, take their phone away. You do not give it back to them until the end of class. And that never fit my disciplinary style. And so at the beginning of the semester, I told the students I would do that, but I didn't really believe it for myself. So it felt a little bit like I was bluffing. And when that actually happened, that students were on their phone, I jumped on them and said, "You have to give me your phone." And I felt awkward and uncomfortable, and they felt awkward and uncomfortable. And it just felt like I was undermining my own power in the classroom. So today, that's not what I do at all. I found a disciplinary measure that works for my style. I teach adults. I teach university students. So I have the ability to treat them like adults. And I tell them from the very first week of class that you're not supposed to use your phone in my class, because if you're using your phone, if you're texting, if you're ordering food, you're not working on your English. But you are an adult. This is your decision to make. If I see you using your phone, I'm going to write it down, and it will affect your participation points for that day and for the whole semester. If you're consistently using your phone, you're not getting a high score in the class. Using your phone will get you a C. So I've found a disciplinary measure that works for me. Now, what I just said might not work for you. Just have an open mind. Try a few different things. And if someone gives you advice that immediately doesn't sit right, then maybe it's not the right style for you. So those are the 5 mistakes that I made as a first-time ESL teacher. Hopefully you can watch this video and maybe learn a little bit from my mistakes. Like I said, I made more like 500 mistakes, but these were the ones that really influenced my first few years of teaching and things that I have since corrected. And I feel like my classes are so much better for them. The students learn better, I enjoy them more, and hopefully they enjoy them more too. Okay, if you liked this video, if you found it helpful, just give it a like. That way more teachers will be able to see this video, and hopefully they don't have to make the same mistakes. That's all for today. I will see you next time.